7, 2014. The meeting will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Linda, please call the roll.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Echols? Here. Mr. Clarence?
Here.
Ms. Green? Here. Mr. Cooks?
Here.
Vice Chairman Fiore?
Here.
Chairman Hippo?
Here. Next on the agenda is the time for public comment on any of the agenda items currently facing the commission. And I know that former Mayor Scherf wanted to address this, so Bill, I ask you to...
I have a little bit of leeway. I do want to talk about the salary and a couple other things, just a few moments. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, and I don't think anyone will mind if you get to a discussion and you want to offer something to
Yeah.
share that. It's kind of been the process we've been following, Bill. Oh, you don't get out of hand.
Anyway, I'd just like to begin to thank you for your time and effort. I truly appreciate, I'm sure, the citizens of Altoona, the dedication that you've shown, and also the progress that you have made. And I've been trying to follow you not only in news media, but also on the video that is shown on the city's website. And the fact that you are planning on ending in June and staying on target, I think that's extremely important. So I laud you for your effort, as I've done in the past. I also like to commend you for taking a look at the full-time mayor and also recommending the home rule charter. One of the things that I know as the former mayor that I've tried to stress is, and I feel that as the former mayor, what cities do, they get into Act 47, they have an entrance plan, but what is the exit plan? And so I have developed an exit plan. I'm not here to talk about that this evening, but it's something that I've been working on and I've given to other members of council. I've also talked to the city manager about it also. I strongly believe that Altoona can come out of this by 2017. I believe it can happen, and I thank you for your effort, because really two of the most important things of the plan would be the full-time mayor and also home rule charter and what that has to offer. I'm talking about right now a recovery plan, which is Act 47, which we're going through at the present time. I'm pleased to announce also that we have passed what has happened in 2013, a balanced budget with a small surplus. And I think that's extremely important. It's something that would not have occurred if we wouldn't have gone into Act 47. I don't know where we would be. And that is going to be a continued projection for 2014, 15, and 16 also. So that's good news. Also, the fact that I think with a plan that with your help, your support, I think we can do this. And now there are other things that we have to do, but again, I'm not here to discuss that this evening. So keep up the good work, and I really am pleased with what you're doing. And also I'm looking forward to the home rule charter once it has been completed. I'd like to talk about the mayor's salary, which I know is on the agenda this evening. And you know, this is a paycheck that I brought here this evening, my last paycheck as mayor. And this basically is based on what I made my first month and what I made my last month. Now, I had to have more money taken out because I could not pay my daughter as a college dependent or as a child dependent. And so I also had to pay for a sign at the end, and my last paycheck was $17.99. And that was a full pay. But I didn't do it for the money. I know Councilman Butterball talked about that. It wasn't about the money. It was about a service that I could do for the city of Altoona. But I think there definitely has to be a change in the mayor's salary. If this is going to be a full-time position, it should reflect that also. I'd just like to read you something from WNEP. You don't have that in your packet there, but I know Mr. Willett referred to Scranton. Scranton was paying their mayor $50,000, and what they did in 2014, they raised it to $60,000. They didn't want to go to $80,000 right away because they thought that was too controversial. And so over the next 3 years, they're going to raise it a total of $5,000 each year. and to cap it at $75,000 by the year 2017. Both council, and I'm quoting here, many taxpayers at the meeting said the next mayor will have a tough task of getting the city out of its financial mess and deserve to be paid more. The next mayor will have much to do, said Councilmember Frank Joyce. This pay increase will eventually put the mayor's salary closer to the average mayor's pay in comparable cities across Pennsylvania. And when you take a look at a lot of other municipalities throughout the Commonwealth, our salary doesn't even come close to the salaries of mayors, said Resident Doug Miller. And I think that's extremely important. I don't like, let them be well paid, good paid, comparable to other third-class cities. Cities that perhaps are a little larger than us, cities that are perhaps smaller than us. I'd also like to alert you to Senate Bill 1157. I'm not going to go over this with you, but there's a hearing on this. Senator Eichelberger is the sponsor of this. There's a hearing Thursday. It's going to be televised on PCN. If you just look at that brief summary, quote, establishing the unincorporated service district trust fund, providing for disincorporation of municipalities and the establishment of unincorporated service districts. And that is cities that go into Act 47. They're looking at putting a cap on that, and I don't know where this is going to go, but if you want to see that, it's on PCN Live on Thursday. The other thing I'd like to address, Ms. Echols, that I wasn't able to give you some facts and figures the last time I was here. You asked about the EIT. And if you turn to the second page, if you look at the real estate millage, what's nice about the home rule charter is that, and I'm sure Mr. Clapper has alluded to this to Tyrone, it's a balancing act where you have the EIT plus the real estate. In the plan, we are capped at 30 mills. And if you look at the shade tree, recreation, and general millage, they're all the same, and they will remain the same based on the Act 47 plan through 2016. The only increase that you see through 2012 and 13 is for debt of 1.07 mils, and there is no increase for 2014. With the Act 47 plan, we have really brought things under control. Expenditures, taxation, and we're trying to move forward. And that's why I think this home rule charter is very important. And in addressing, if you look down to the right side, Mr. Clapper will be my judge and jury on this one. If I make a mistake, he will correct me. Right now, you have the Local Tax Enabling Act is 1%. 0.5% goes to the city, 0.5% goes to the school district. That generates approximately $3 million. And if you look to right above there, the Act 205 EIT for 2012, the same for 2013. That's the non-resident tax for not only the city, but also for what we would call commuters. That is our distress pension fund, which is allowed, and that's 0.2. That generates about, let's see, I mentioned $3 billion, about $2 million per year, and that's used for our distress pension fund. If you look under Act 47, 2014, you see the increase, how we got to 1.35 and 1.45. Now, if you look to the next page, from 2013 to 2016, that will generate approximately $7,290,000. That is what Ms. Echols refers to as that commuter tax. It breaks it down. This is taken from the Act 47 plan. It breaks it down per year. And with this commuter tax or non-resident tax, it's something that really has kept our property taxes down. And in the future, if you do go to home rule charter, there's a chance for years you will never have to raise property taxes because of the EIT. However, when you go to home rule charter, that if you are not in Act 47, that non-resident tax goes away except for that pension, distress pension. If you are in Act 47, I want to mention this to Dave, that you are you can still use that non-resident if you are in Act 47. But we don't want to be in Act 47. We want to get out of Act 47. So the EIT is not capped if you're under home rule. The property tax is not capped. There's some other taxes that are not capped, but there are a couple like business and mercantile taxes that are capped. And so the one thing I'd like to emphasize is if you go to a full-time mayor, there's a checks and balances. It's not like if you elect a council, they're just going to say, raise the EIT or raise the taxes. That's why you have citizens. That's why you have a council, a manager, and a mayor to control costs and to make sure things move forward properly. And finally, the Act 47 plan mentions home rule as an exit strategy. I'm not going to read all that to you, but I do want to commend you. I think that your work has been excellent. I realize that this may be the last time that I may have a chance to talk to you, and I felt a need to come here. I'm very proud of the effort that you put forth. I'm so thankful that you are looking at a full-time mayor and that you are looking at home rule charter. I believe that we can get out of it. I'm hopeful. I talked about recovery plan, revitalization and recreation and downtown, hopefully in housing, but also a renewal, a fresh start. And this is what the home rule charter is going to give us. And I will tell you this, what I'm hearing from the public out there, they want to see a full-time mayor. And I was just at a fish fry the other night, and a senior citizen came up to me, he said, when are we going to change this form of government? I said, we're working on it. So I think people truly want to see change, and you're doing it the right way. I really appreciate all your comments, Mayor. I appreciate allowing comments to go on and giving a great deal of leeway. I think you've shown great leadership in doing that, allowing everybody to have input in this. And so I hope that my comments will give you a real desire to finish this, and I will support it, and I'm hopeful that everybody else will. That was a mandate to form this study commission. It was overwhelming. They want to see change. And so congratulations, good luck. And I'm going to stay for the rest of the meeting and enjoy everything that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment? Noting that there is none, we will move on to adoption of the March 17, 2014 meeting minutes that were circulated. I'll entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
And a second. Is there any discussion regarding those minutes? If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Item 6 is the review of the charter draft. I guess this is draft 2, and Larry had circulated that. Larry, do you have any comments, first of all, before we, or anything in particular you want to bring to our attention regarding this draft?
I don't. It's what I believe is what we went over the last time. I tried to incorporate in here, but if I miss something, let me know. And there will be further drafts as we go on.
Yeah, and it's going to keep coming, so does anyone have any comments on this second draft?
I would only comment, thank you for your draft. Are there, I think I asked this before, are there standard phrases, paragraphs that are in charters?
No. Do whatever you want. You just have to have certain things in a charter. I think if
You
you're
have to have
election by
certain
districts, there are only two. Let me see if I can find it. The number on council and whether or not they're elected by districts, that has to be included in the charter. I think everything else is up in the air.
We could make a half-page
Well,
chart if
that's,
we'd like.
the reason I'm asking is the further we go here, the more inclined I am to say as little as possible in the charter, under the assumption that effective leadership is going to be provided for the city, and my preference would not to be constrained, to constrain future leadership.
Any other comments on that? I think I would echo that. In fact, I know I would.
I think there'll be an opportunity at some point when we look at the charter draft we develop as a whole to go back through and see if there's something that maybe in hindsight we said unnecessarily, and look at more so stripping additional things out versus adding more things in. But I think it's sort of a building blocks where some other sections lead to other sections until we have a chance to look back at the whole thing as a complete charter front to back.
It does strike me as interesting that there are no, would you say, Larry, two things that are actually required of a charter?
The only two I can find.
Where's all the other stuff come from in all
Well,
these charters?
we have to set up a government, and usually it's done on the basis of other governments.
Okay.
You need a lead, you know, you need leaders, council, somebody
Okay.
that people can elect to make
Structure,
the decision.
right, yeah.
Right.
Effectively, you could, though, leave the whole thing up to the administrative code that would be adopted by city council and could be changed at any time. This is a way of making it a little more permanent and stable.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your comment, Richard, the fact that we're going to have an opportunity to go back and take a look at it at some point.
Well, I think we have that opportunity every week, but I think that at some point, when this goes from being a draft to a sort of a final draft, I think we're going to have to make sure that all the pieces work together as a whole versus individual sections.
And maybe this is as good a time as any to talk about this, but trying to gauge where we were, and I apologize for my absence the last meeting, but I was having a lot more fun than anybody here was. But we got an awful lot accomplished in the capable hands of the vice chairman. It seems to me it's fairly, we're close to, I would ballpark this at 60 to 70% done. And a lot of what's left, I mean, I think we're over the big mountains, maybe a few little hills to deal with. But I'm really pleased with where we are on the timeline. One of the things I think we need to make certain we're doing is, you know, we had talked about doing a public hearing at some point so that we can maximize our input and the public participation on this. And I think it was Richard or somebody said, hey, let's do it when we have a more or less rough draft out there so that people can be as fully informed about it in advance of the public hearing. We can take comments on as much of the subjects as we can, and then we can use that information to revisit some or none or all of it, depending on what the feedback is. So what I'm wondering is if we are at a point where we can sort of look into the future a little bit and start to gauge when we want to do that.
Yeah. The way I see it is that we have tonight's meeting with a couple more of these bullet points using Carroll as a guideline. There's two major sections left, which I think we've talked about the last meeting and we discussed on the finance and the city treasurer, the city controller end, that we may want some additional testimony and input from those. And I think that possibly one meeting could be sort of fact-finding and trying to hone that with our potential guests at that meeting, then the next meeting writing those draft sections, or maybe it can be done in one, and then a final meeting to do some general provisions, the transition, and the initiative and referendum. So I see that as your 3 or 4 more meetings to finish out the charter, potentially 3. Then potentially a full draft, at which point we could publish on the website at least, and potentially call a public hearing to hopefully have some time to review that charter, take a look at it, come to the meeting with any questions. The other thing we do need to do, and maybe Larry can talk to what this needs to include, is we have to write a final report, which is a summary sort of everything we've done to this point. I don't know how detailed that needs to be, but you know, editing to the charter. But that'd be 3 to 4 meetings on actual drafting a charter, 1 for a public hearing, a second meeting then to somewhat finalize the draft and take any of the input we got from a public meeting, another meeting or 2 for the final report as we maybe refine the draft to where it becomes the final charter. So we're talking 3 to 4, 5, 6, 7 meetings. I don't know where that puts us, but that should be.
Well, I'm thinking about for this draft that we got will continue emerging.
Mhm.
So if we look at your 3 to 4 estimate,
To get to a final draft, I think.
correct, we would have one more meeting in April, two in May, so we would probably be looking in the middle of June
Have a
for the
completed
public
draft.
hearing.
Yes, correct. And what was our time frame for having to have it on the ballot? Remember?
September, that was like the early.
I think we're shooting for
We were shooting for
August,
August.
but I think September was the actual
It's
deadline.
like September 8th or something, I can try to find out.
So, I mean, we get if we're in the middle of June for the public hearing, and then get back for, and maybe do it in between the two meetings in June. Get back for a meeting post-public hearing, see if there's any revisions or modifications. That puts us end of June. That would give us 2 months.
Do the final report and just get,
I think
all
that
the
final
formatting
report's not
and-
gonna take a lot of time.
yeah, I don't know who's gonna write it or what needs to include, but I just know we have to submit one.
But I think a lot of that would be, as exhibits, all of our meeting minutes. It'd be a matter of preparing a summary of the charter.
Any financial cost summary?
Right. My point is,
Yeah.
we're in an excellent position in terms of timeline. Is everyone okay with maybe trying to find a date middle of June for public hearing over and above our commitment to the two meetings?
Well, I think the only thing that hinges is possibly this AC and Omar's schedule, and when in the next, presumably the next meeting would be the best one to have them in at, but one of the next two at the minimum. Me along? Oh, AC gave us some dates, didn't he?
Yes, but only one date, and it's in May. And didn't I say May 19th?
I'm almost
No,
certain that's
no.
what you said.
That's the only date.
So that's
Leave it out.
4 meetings out.
Pushes us really back.
Yeah, so it's pushed back. Because I was thinking, when I said 3 or 4, that was counting tonight,
Well,
actually.
it really doesn't, I mean.
I was counting tonight as one of the 3 or 4.
Well, okay, but
Because there are two major
but I
things
can throw
are,
4 more in.
yeah, we might be
So,
twiddling our
if we
thumbs
get
for
any-
one meeting before they come in, then,
Well,
or have to cancel
Because we
one
need their information and to
to
have.
move on. Because we're really talking, for them, we need the contracts, the financial procedures, and
Hey, this is from Omar.
Omar and AC, I would think.
I think it was just AC that couldn't make it till maybe Walmart.
Yeah, Omar might be able to get him in there soon.
Yeah.
So if it's
Do it.
only AC who can't make it to the 19th, AC would be the primary person to talk about the controller position.
Controller, but I think there's some overlap with the financial procedures.
Why can't we do like we did with David and have him on the air?
I don't know if it's physical can't be here, if it's just,
I think it's scheduled.
scheduling.
Well, maybe if we push back and just say, is there any way, we could always ask if he could bump it up based on our timeline.
He's gonna be away.
But could he call, maybe he could call.
Could he call in like I said with David?
We could ask, I guess, if he
Check
can't.
plus-
If he can't, we'll just have to work around it, but I
We
think
got,
it,
we're gonna have extra time, so, and one of the things, I cannot be here, I am out of the country on business for the next meeting. So, I don't wanna miss another one, whether we could reschedule that or cancel it,
Can you call in?
If
The
you'll-
expensive
if you'll
2-hour
pay-
call.
Where are you going to
We'll
be?
Skype in, that'll be free.
On Monday, I'll be on a boat,
Oh,
or I'll be in Puerto Rico.
Well, but with our schedule, it looks like that may not be,
sounds like
we should have the meeting on the boat.
I like it.
not out of the country.
it's in international
That's a good
waters.
point.
Um,
Honest to honest.
Yeah, but I mean, if they aren't able to come in, because I think that we need them within the next 2 or 3 meetings, so if that if we push it back, and catch them for that meeting.
Thoughts?
I will be in Florida from June 16th to June 20th, so we're going to look at scheduling a public hearing, I can do that week.
May 19th, anyway, I'm not here.
I think it was the week after the first week.
I really wish I didn't hate Apple so much, because I do like them.
What?
Is there someone else that could fill in?
I'll
for-
be out the same time you.
Is there
on
someone
vacation.
else that we could consider having come in and talk to us about the position besides AC? I mean,
The controller's position?
Yes, I
I don't
think
think
there
there's
are.
anyone nearly, I mean, the guys,
well, he's not, I would have to think that there are some individuals that are qualified.
I wouldn't mind having somebody in addition to him, but I don't know that we should not.
Well, we can ask if he can call in, maybe he can, and then if he can't, we might have to ask.
So you.
Well, let me, if we could be candid, AC's gonna say the position's very important and we need to have it.
Right.
I don't think he is.
Well, I don't think that's what we were gonna,
Oh,
no, I think
okay,
we were
then I am
gonna,
surprised.
we weren't gonna ask that question. I thought we were more or less just gonna try to get a better understanding of, like, why it's needed and those types of things. Now, granted, he's gonna tell you it's really important, but, I mean, I don't think we were gonna say, do you think we should keep your position?
Well, as
I
I
think he's
said, I
prepared to
have
come
an
and talk about
impression.
that, but I'm not willing, you should hear from him, not me.
Yeah.
Well, I think from the original conversations he brought to us, is that he definitely conveyed that it was important what he does. I mean,
The duties are important,
Sure.
whether or not it needs to be in
Yeah,
a separate
well,
elected position.
Right, because what we've seen is in other places, they don't have that.
That's right.
Right.
And
would it
that's
be
why-
more plausible to have the gentleman back in from the state that is the so-called expert on all of this and put him on the spot? I mean, then have a
Well,
neutral
I don't think
opinion?
he's a position, an expert on the controller position.
No, I don't think he's an expert on the controller position, but I think he's an expert on what's taken place with others that have done this, and whether or not they've maintained the controller, or whether they haven't, and whether or not it's something they consider necessary.
If there's a chance that he's going to tell us that we need the position, but maybe not as an elected position, then maybe what we should be hearing from is find a city that has a non-elected budget position and hear from them.
I think as many opinions as we
About how
can
it
get.
works for them.
I mean, if we look at the schedule, if we would not do the next meeting, which Chairman Hippo cannot be at on the 21st, that would put us here on May 5th. We could take care of the general provisions, transition and continuity, initiative and referendum on that day. And then on the 19th, have AC as scheduled, bring Omar in and any other guests we would like on the 19th. Then the 19th, we either just hear testimony and get all of our thoughts straight, or we also try to write those particular sections, or we come back then on the 2nd and write those final financial procedures, contracts, and the controller positions. And then that would make us done on June 2nd either way.
And that'd be the first, and the third would be the 16th, which is when you're out anyway, right? So you're not really out.
I'm out too.
Between the meetings.
I'm out the 16th.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You're not, I mean, if I was saying,
We
I
have the
guess I
special,
said two things. I said in between the meetings, then I said the middle of the month, but it turns out,
well, but the 9th or the 23rd, we would have to advertise it special anyhow, so making it the 9th or the 23rd wouldn't be a big deal for the public hearing. Plus, we have a date that we're missing on the 30th because it's 5 weeks again.
what's the council calendar on the 9th?
Council meeting the 11th.
You guys were doing strategic planning,
When's
is that gonna be over?
Strategic planning
I didn't put it on
will
my
be
calendar.
June 9th.
Yeah.
June 9th.
So
What about the
that-
20? What about the 23rd or the 30th?
But when are you coming back?
The 20th.
Oh,
We're gone the same week.
The 23rd and 30th, so that if you want to do it like on a Monday night.
Can I be presumptuous and wonder if there's any, I mean, I don't know, are you scheduled on all your strategic planning? It might be good to have a joint meeting on the 9th, since we're heading in to the public comment section anyway. I'm just spitballing that.
That'd be a nice idea.
That would be.
Because we'll have the whole thing roughed out. You guys can be part of the public comment at that time. So all of you want to show up and have your voice be heard officially.
Would you mind taking that back to your group and maybe we can sort of plan on it on the 9th?
When's the next the first strategic planning meeting? I don't want.
April 14th.
Okay, that's the one I was.
That's one where we go over
That's-
the land value tax.
Yeah. There's nothing else on the next schedule then. We haven't scheduled the other one.
So I think that either way, even if we miss the next meeting, that would still give us something to do on May 5th, which would be all the rest of the cookie cutter stuff. Then the 19th, we can hear from those people. The 2nd, we can write those sections. We'll have the draft out then by the 6th and ready for the public comment on the 9th. And then we can move on to incorporating those comments at our next meeting, which wouldn't be till July 7th. If there's anything to come from that meeting, or see the final draft and make whatever little changes we want. 21st for our report. And see if we need to have any more meetings.
It seems to work.
So what is the date then the public hearing would be?
The 9th of June. We would cancel the next meeting, which would be the 21st of April. The agenda for the 5th would be whatever we don't get through today, which would be essentially general provisions, transition committee, and initiatives and referendums. And then the 19th would be the day that AC said was good, that we would have testimony from him and Omar and any other potential people that Claude or Richard may want to try to invite or have you invite.
And I'll throw out, Councilman Kelly had contacted me saying the mayor of Easton has been kind of following this, and he had served as mayor under the old form of government and under the new, and he's willing to come up and meet with us, so that might be another interesting voice to hear from.
Do they have an AC?
Do they have an AC? Honestly, I don't remember. Nobody has an AC.
Oh, well,
Well, looking for that, the end date is September 5th. That's when we have to get this report, the final report. And Dave, to answer your question, this is the only thing the Home Rule law states about the Home Rule Charter. If the commission recommends the adoption of a Home Rule Charter, it shall specify the number to be on the municipal council, so you know you must have to have a council. Okay. All offices to be filled by election, and whether election shall be on an at-large district or combination district and at-large basis. That's it.
Easton has a Department of Finance, they involve the treasurer.
Sure.
I think they just saw they have a control for it.
Do you have a date or a page here? Why'd you do that?
That's all I needed to see.
You got the answer.
Page 13.
I missed it somehow.
There it is, city control.
Before your turn. So, just to keep this moving, does it sound like we're somewhat in agreement with the schedule as laid out by the vice chairman, that something that can be accomplished?
I am.
Sure.
Councilman, you go to,
June 9th, public hearing.
see if we can do a joint meeting with council, and, maybe we can impose on Penn State to do it downtown at the theater again.
We have a year?
Well, I don't care, you
We're
want
expecting a
it?
bigger turnout than that. We don't have to. Do we get to sit in the big seats if we have? It's our meeting.
You have to sit on.
One would imagine, I would imagine we would have a bigger turnout because we'll have a document at that point and we'll
I
have
hope.
lightning rods for people.
I hope.
In June?
June's a good time for downtown, though, 'cause
I think
Tough
we
in
should
June.
try.
Oh, but we'll have a draft.
I'm just saying, it'd be tough to be a big draw in June.
Oh, I see, oh, okay.
Why, 'cause it's warm out.
People on vacation.
that's not like graduation or anything.
The whole city
or is
doesn't
it?
go on vacation in June,
Just to make
so
sure.
somebody will be here.
It might snow 3 more times, so.
I'm just saying, it's
Kids will
not,
still be in school.
yeah.
They're already gone.
They'll still
I
be in
don't know
school
what-
in July.
Does anybody know what Altoona's graduation is?
They moved completion date is 17th.
Oh, you serious?
17th is the last
Really?
day.
Oh,
vouch for that.
That's correct.
Hollingsburg's is 6th,
Wow.
I
I
thought.
was gonna joke and say June 9th.
17th.
Kids will be graduating and heading off to college in the same week. Wow.
My kids quit.
But,
That's not graduation then.
yeah, so,
Well, graduation is usually about a week before the last day of school, in most cases.
That would be a Friday night though.
I'm just asking just to
I'm
make
not sure
sure.
when it is this year.
Yeah, graduation's usually a Friday
Okay,
night.
then we should be all right.
I think we probably will be anyway, and I don't know that, we'll probably find something else that would be a conflict too.
Well, since we are-
Curve game or,
Since we are canceling the next meeting, if we need to advertise that, we should do both to get the best bang for the
June
buck.
11th is Altoon's graduation.
There you go.
I don't have it on my calendar because my niece graduates.
That's a Wednesday.
It's Wednesday.
That is something.
all right, so can you
So
follow through with the
we're gonna-
powers that be? And
We're gonna cancel the April 21st meeting, and then we're gonna schedule the public hearing for June the 9th.
One
At
oh,
6 o'clock? 7 o'clock? 6
Oh, that's it,
6.
six, I think.
Yeah.
Okay,
um,
Council,
You want
we
that
have to
for
go
Penn
6?
State downtown?
With, June sixth?
No, 6 o'clock, June 9. And
Yes, I'm-
we're gonna try and impose upon Chairman, or Chancellor Bechtel and see if we can get downtown.
and I'm not saying my calendar is the end-all be-all here, but I only have meetings scheduled through July 21st. I don't know what we advertised last time, but that could have been when we stopped advertising.
It's on the side of that. It's, I think, only through June is when you,
That's a training room, that ends in March, that's not it.
okay.
All I'm saying is it does look like we may need,
I show it in June, and it's June 2nd and 16th.
you don't have the 7th and the 21st?
I don't think so.
I have July 7th and 21st on my schedule. Well, regardless, should we take this opportunity to schedule the 7th, the 21st, the 4th, and the 18th, since it seems like we will probably need that for something.
What do they think they want?
What days were those again?
August.
Can you repeat?
What are we gonna need it for?
We're gonna have to do the final report, we're gonna have to have a vote on the final charter, okay? Okay.
Final
I know,
report's
I
not
agree.
pickle.
Yeah, we have it here, it's June 16th, last advertised.
We have to ratify and sign a final report, we have to ratify and sign a final charter, and then we have to send it on
I don't
over
wanna
to the
schedule
county.
August just because there'll be a temptation to use it.
Okay,
I wanna stay on top of this and be done.
Yeah.
so we have the 9th,
June is the last scheduled date.
and then June 23rd, or
16th.
16th. We need to cancel the 16th. And we could go to the 23rd potentially, unless that's a conflict with you guys. If it is, we can go to the 30th. You have a conflict? June 23rd? That is no.
Now, now you're just talking a regular meeting or?
Yeah, regular meeting on June 23rd or the June 30th.
Yeah, that should do it.
Which one, you guys?
I don't think that I care.
Okay, June 23rd. We need to have a regular 6 o'clock meeting. That will be the recap of whatever we want to change from the public hearing. And then July 7th and 21st should be our last two.
But we won't need that one either.
That might be our vote day, once we go ahead of that. Unless we want to change it. I mean, we got to advertise all these now, so if we want to move it,
We'd be able to vote long before the final report.
we have to sign the final report then too.
You have all that, Linda?
Mhm.
Thank you. Alright, and then while I'm thinking for that, meeting, okay, that was productive.
Necessary.
No, it was.
I thought you were being sarcastic.
How do you do?
No, I didn't. We got it done.
Okay. I agree.
Mayor and council salaries. Linda did an amazing job of putting together this spreadsheet.
You gotta give this to DCD, it's the most complete one in the
Yeah,
state.
actually.
Kim helped me with this, by the way.
Well,
Thank her too.
Well, it's not-
We spent a lot of time.
She's
I'm
great.
gonna give you some information on the controller the next time. We just didn't wanna give you all of it.
Well,
We
but
weren't
I
ready to go.
send it to DCD along with the bill for your time.
Yeah.
That's definitely better than,
Don't send it, just tell them you pay.
I want to throw out again a strong pitch that we consider the salary element needs to be with council. In other words, I strongly believe it should not be in the charter. I know we had a 4-3 vote on this, but
Who won?
putting it in the charter,
Putting it in the charter.
why? Yeah.
What do you guys think?
That should have been one of my calls.
Are we saying which way you're voting then?
I'm with
You're
you.
agreeing with them.
I'm with you.
Well,
No, it's unnecessarily
we just said,
constraining.
we weren't
Absolutely.
hired to pick the salary of the mayor.
Time to change. I don't understand why we would
Well,
want
would
to.
have just been a starting point.
It was a starting point, and because they would always be able to change it down the road, but it was a starting point.
And I think we had talked about the fact that, you know, anytime you're setting your own salaries or voting your own salaries, it becomes very difficult to do that. So we were saying if we at least provided some type of starting point,
But
then at least it would give them, you know, a building block to go off of. Where if you just let it with nothing, then they're basically creating their own salary.
Well, they would have this.
That's what I was just about to say, is
I think
that this
Okay.
has done that, you know, this is a remarkable document. I think if you look at this, it's pretty obvious where the number needs to be. But I'm saying it's not our role, it's not our judgment. I don't think that's our job. I think it's to explore it, raise these issues, and turn it over to council, because if they screw it up, they're the ones that are going to have to deal with it. It's their job to get it right. We're to be giving them the footprint of the government.
I think we are turning it over to them in the long term, and then that's exactly what we had decided last time. But I think that history shows that councils are elected bodies in general. I won't say councils, elected bodies are always loath to give themselves their salary. It's always a problematic issue. And so I think, basically, I think we can do a good service to what needs to be done here and step to the plate and not kick the ball down the road, kick the can down the road. I think we should deal with this.
But I'm not saying it's gonna necessarily be kick the can down the road. This I think, to me, makes it reasonably obvious where it has to be.
Yeah.
You might fight over a couple $1,000 one way or the other, I suspect, but, we've done that. Two, there's going to be a transition committee that will be in place to make recommendations to council anyway. Now, the transition committee can put out a number and the council can ignore it. Ultimately, they have to adopt the ordinance anyway. But historically, when it's been put in, it looks like it's bad. It needs to be changed, it needs to be fixed repeatedly. It just seems to me
Yeah,
that.
I'd like to make two comments. Well, in looking at this since the last meeting where we've discussed this, one thing I've seen consistently by the numbers that we've been provided and what's in those original charters is they almost all either got it wrong or it had to be changed substantially. But typically, the Home Rule Study Commissions did not do a very good job of setting a starting point. If you assume that where they ended up now is at least market rate or close to it, even with the pressures that you mentioned. So there has been a tendency to really lowball the reality as compared to where these cities have gone to since their charters have been adopted. So I've maybe modified my opinion slightly there. The second thing is, I think that we've rudimentary received some knowledge and some education on the budget side of the city, but I don't know that we have the full picture. So I still would not be comfortable in necessarily at this point, even looking at these numbers historically and populations and trying to judge where a good starting point would be. I don't necessarily know if I have enough information to speak on City Council's behalf to give them something to start from. So I've moved a little bit more towards possibly letting this up to the transition committee. But one thing I do think that we should maybe address in the charter is the benefits. I mean, I'm sort of the opinion that this is a full-time position and they are going to have medical and sort of a basic package of benefits that would be very similar to the package that any director or a manager of the city would have. But I don't know that we want to tie the city with long-term pension debt in that. And I think that whatever salary is set should be set with like a IRA type contribution in mind that's done by that mayor, and not having a long-term pension burden put on the city by somebody who may get elected for 4 years or 8 years or however long. So I think that maybe we should address limitations on the fact that it will be full-time, so you have to give the person medical benefits and any other benefits that are in the basic package, but not a pension.
Larry, on pensions, will he have to be a vested pension? Would it have to be a 5-year or better?
I think you can decide whatever you want it to be.
Doesn't fall under ERISA?
You want it to fall under ERISA. Remember, you're like the legislature here. You can tell them what you want.
I would agree with, there's no way in the world I would want to set up a pension plan for that. I think that'd be,
I like what Lebanon did, because I agree with you. I think I said that last time, is I'm normally a big pension advocate, but not in this case. And, but I think we should actually literally spell out that it is expected to have some sort of a match. I don't think it would speak too horrible to actually spell out a percentage match to an IRA style. And so Lebanon says there's a 5,000 contribution to their IRA, so it specifies what the contribution is going to be.
I mean, I don't know. I think that it should be taken into consideration with setting the salary. You should know the portion of that salary needs to be towards the person's retirement, and I think it'd be up to their individual planning on whether or not they actually went forward and used it now or put it away.
Well, one reason that I feel strongly in stating it is also I think that this gets to be a political football going back and forth, is that it'd be really easy for a mayor to come in who, let's say, stereotypically is 55 or 65 years old, to say, well, I'm not going to draw a pension, or I'm not going to take any contribution to my pension. And frankly, when you're 55 or 65, you pretty much already have your pension and your retirement plan set anyway. So it's really easy to financially say that. But then they turn around and say that, and then use that as a justification of why they're not going to give a new 25-year-old hire of a pension plan, which is ludicrous. So, so I think that basically all employees should have some sort of a plan. So
I think I'm looking
feel
at more.
strongly we should,
to me, it comes down to my core belief on term limits. So I don't think anyone should be in the office long enough to merit a pension for something.
Well, I'm not talking pension. I'm just saying everyone needs to have some sort of a retirement plan. I mean, there's some mechanism.
But
Whether it's on your own or whether it's separate, the point is it's part of your salary. So I mean, let's not fool ourselves that if we pay the person and say, well, you're responsible for your own, paying into your own retirement plan, that fundamentally means that we're going to pay you more money, because it costs money to do that. We all know that. So I think we should just be upfront about what those costs are.
I'm not as much, I've been thinking about this too, and we've had 3 weeks. I'm not necessarily against a full-time mayor and full-time strong mayor, but one thing I noticed, and Linda, thank you for this, the one thing I did notice is that the only time where there's a full-time mayor and a full-time city manager is in the city of Reading. Out of the, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that are listed, only one of them has both. And I guess that's my main
Which column
No.
are you looking at?
problem.
Says, do you have a city manager?
Yeah, but no, the equivalent position,
Would be a finance.
you mix them a little bit, right? The managing director is effectively the city manager. The business administrator is effectively the city manager. So that's not necessarily true. Allentown has both. Erie does not. Reading has both. Scranton has both. Bethlehem has both. Lancaster has both. Harrisburg does not. York has both. State College doesn't. State College just has a part-time. Wilkesboro has both. So right now we've only have Erie
Have
that
different
doesn't.
titles to them.
They just have different titles.
Williamsport does not. Williamsport and Erie are the only two that don't. Easton has both. Lebanon has both. Hazleton has both.
In all cases.
There's only one that doesn't have both.
Yeah.
Erie's the only one that's a complete mayor with no one to help him.
So we're just talking about the mayor's pension, correct? Just the mayor, not council?
Well, I
Well, I
think we
think-
address both, but
Yeah,
Well,
we're talking about the concept of,
well, yeah, well, the council, I'm totally against council, and council's part-time.
Okay, so we're
and
just
that's-
talking about the mayor's pension.
Yeah, because
Well,
they're
if
gonna be
I
a
don't-
full-time
Yeah.
employee, so I think, you know, what we're saying is since they're full-time, although, like you said, the chances of them being at a later in life position.
Why are we worried about if we set a salary for the mayor? Actually, I guess if we're not gonna set a salary,
no, I'm just saying,
why worry about it?
I don't know that we need to set a salary, but I think that maybe we should identify that they'd be eligible for a benefit package similar to the, manager's package, similar to the mayor's package, but no pension is available in the charter for the mayor. And then we can go on to say that since it says council's part-time, that only reasonable costs will be reimbursed and there's no benefit package or pension.
Okay, so if we are to identify a charter at a certain level of organization, why do we want to get into that level of micromanagement? Why don't we just say we have full-time mayors should be compensated equitably
We can.
and fairly?
We can do any of that. Like I said, we only need 2 lines, 2 or 3 lines.
I mean, I am beginning to think that if I don't put my trust in the future leaders, I trust the leaders around this table and the current leaders. But we're talking about, potentially generations down the line. And I am disinclined to restrain them with things that we think might be good in 2014. Just seems to me to be short-sighted and micromanaging.
But even if they go forward and set a salary and a pension or whatever benefit, then at some point it probably won't serve their needs and they'll have to change one or other of both anyway, right?
I mean,
So-
what if there's an earthquake
Yeah.
in town?
Oh, I'm just talking that through though,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
basically, if we set those 2 things, they'll need to change it at some point.
Correct.
Or if they set those things, then they'll need to
I'd
change it.
rather not set them under the
Okay.
assumption that
That
people
makes
in the
sense.
future are gonna have the wherewithal and the immediate facts to make those
Yeah.
good decisions.
That makes
and
sense.
the thing about the charter is, we'd like to have a document, I think, that stands the test of time, that doesn't need to be amended constantly.
So am I hearing that you wouldn't even address the benefits or pension, that we would let it up to city council to complete the package, both salary and what sort of benefits they do or do not want to offer?
Through the recommendation of the transition committee, the council to adopt it by ordinance. That way they can modify it by ordinance, not modify the charter.
Is this transition committee gonna be more knowledgeable than us?
Can't possibly.
I would agree.
Just a rare chance
Who are
that it
they?
might be.
Who are they gonna be?
We have to make that up too.
Yeah.
Oh, we have to identify
3 meetings
transition.
from now.
Could be us.
It could be
Some of us.
Okay.
It could be the 7 lines.
I maintain the same position. The less said, the better for the future.
Somebody's got to say something at some point, though. And I
Yeah.
guess the problem here on these particular issues is, do we want to provide a starting jump-off point as a guideline, knowing it's not something we're setting in stone, that these things are able to be changed by ordinance?
I think it is more problematic if we set benefits in there, that's problematic. But I think the salary, the starting off point for the salary, I really see no problem with that. We know that it sets off the starting point, and we actually gave verbiage so that it actually inherently doesn't stay there. It
Yeah,
actually does move, which is inherently better than all the other.
Yeah, I'm happy
charters
with
that we've seen.
what Larry came up with, our whole long discussion there on describing, it gives them it gives city council the opportunity to lower the salary if they think that's necessary, or raise it if they think that's necessary. In the absence of anything, there's a mechanism that gauges it off of the local economy here with what they're paying the other directors. So I'm very happy with what we wrote into the charter as far as that goes.
Is that compensation on page 3?
Probably.
Yes. Yeah, Larry did a nice job. I couldn't figure it out. I still can't understand it, and I would be more averse to including this. It's too much. It's too much said.
It works well, though. I think it's not too much said. I think we need to say something.
It's too complex. You have all kinds of commas and, you know, I mean, it's just.
I
too much.
congratulate him, and then you're coming
No,
down.
you did a nice job.
Actually, like color though, it is colorful.
Oh, the blue is very attractive,
The
yes.
blue and the red.
It goes well with the red.
This doesn't set an amount.
I mean, I would be, of all the things we just discussed, I would be opposed to city council providing a pension for a mayor position, but if you guys are trusting that they're not gonna do that anyhow, or give them the flexibility to do or not to do, depending on whether or not they feel that's feasible, I guess, we don't need to write it in.
The only thing I really wanna see at some point, a consideration somewhere, would be in the compensation paragraph, is term limits. I think that is appropriate for a constitution at some level, and that's what we're trying.
I've got 3 things on the table now. Term
No,
limits,
well, we have this.
basic compensation.
Well, we have this.
I know, but the modifications to that are term limits, baseline of compensation, and whether or not benefits, whether we address or don't address
I
all
don't think
3.
term limits is part of the compensation.
No, that's part of
You do
this.
not.
I want term limits in there somewhere, it's just not in that
It'd be a
paragraph.
Oh, okay, so now there are 2 things on the table. Well, let's resolve one of them.
Chairman, which one do you want to go first?
Compensation, well, I think it's just whether or not we're gonna specify compensation in the charter, or leave it to the transition committee to recommend it to council for their final ordinance.
So I recommend we not specify it in the charter.
I'm fine with that.
One,
I'm about to move that we actually recommend a number.
Okay, well, that's 2
Because I
to
think
1.
we had kind of had that going already.
I would like to see a number.
2 to 2, Chris,
I would like to see a number.
2 to 3,
I don't want to remember.
3 to 3, and I don't want a number.
okay.
And then the other issue is benefits,
Mm-hmm.
slash pension. Do we want, now, do you wanna make a proposal on what you would like to add or see there, Richard?
I haven't really researched exactly how these are spelled out. I see on this chart how they're listed. I mean, I definitely think that benefits need to be provided in addition to reimbursement of reasonable expenses, and you see those sort of,
Why can't
Language
you
in
just
there.
say that?
I would say benefits, reimbursement for reasonable expenses, but no pension would be sort of how I would.
Not to include a pension?
I think the reimbursement of expenses is already in here anyway.
I know.
I think if we're silent on dollar figure, we certainly need to be silent on benefits. Because it's inherently the same thing. We could pay someone, $60,000 with benefits, or we could pay them $100,000 without benefits. It's all how council wants to do it.
We haven't really had that.
I just wanna, in light of that comment, I'm just, to myself, reading this paragraph again to see.
Yeah, what page are you on there? This is Farrell, right?
Okay, no, I'm looking
Our
at
draft.
our
Our
draft,
draft.
page 3.
Compensation?
Oh, okay, page 3. Okay,
The section formerly known as C.2.04.
yeah.
I know, these aren't the best ones.
All right. And Richard, are you indicating you wanna modify this, or do you wanna hold off on that and think that through and propose it next time, or bring something up now, or?
No, I mean, I don't know. Where is everyone on whether or not we need to specify no pension? I mean, I think you can go unsaid with the benefits, and the benefits will, like you say, go along with the salary. I mean, I think that they would understand they need to do that. where we just placed our trust on the whole benefits package, including pension, as to leave it up to city council to make their best recommendation, what they feel is justified for the job, and having the city's budget and welfare in mind.
So would you end that paragraph after the 1, 2, 3, 4, after the black ink, 6 months? Or would you include all the blue?
Oh, no, I think we all agreed that we definitely want the blue. Whatever they start off with as a base salary, because we've just decided we're not going to set that base salary. Whatever they set as a base salary, they have the option periodically to review that and raise it or lower it. Their inaction will establish that it will adjust commensurate to the average percentage received by all department heads, which if it goes down, it goes down. If it goes up by the same.
So then, as written, we could leave it just like that?
We could. And that's what I'm saying, and not address, we've already decided we're not going to address the base salary.
Right.
The question that's on the table now is, should we address telling them, dictating to them that they must provide a benefits package that is...
I would recommend we just leave it like we thought it was good last meeting.
And or whether or not we should prohibit them from offering a pension.
No,
No.
I would leave it just like this.
If you only have somebody in there for 2 terms, and if you're in there long enough to even be vested in the pension, how do you have to?
Well,
We have
know if we're gonna do.
we have complete latitude that the first day they
Okay.
serve,
Yeah, I was thinking.
they're vested, or
I don't think council is gonna be going, and that's certainly not the trend of the way things are going. They're not gonna go and throw out some
another.
ridiculously exorbitant pension.
No.
I can't see that happening.
I agree. We can't see it happening, but is it something we as a 7 feel strongly enough against to write in here?
Well, actually, I would say that the reason we shouldn't is for exactly the reason Joe said, that we shouldn't throw in a lot of other stuff. We can't predict
And,
what's gonna happen in the future.
And I'm willing to, I guess, go along with that.
So it stays as is?
Stays as is, and our absence will automatically leave it to transition or a first council meeting to set fill in those blanks. Absence of talking about it. Okay, the other item would be, which I assume will be the same answer, but maybe not, is the city council's salary.
I would say it's
This is the one that I was actually more adamant that we should set before, is, because this would, council would be setting mayor's salary, which is not actually theirs, but now we're talking council setting council's salary, and that's what I think is a real problem.
Well, but they're going to have the recommendation. I'm trying to distinguish between whether it's in the charter, whether it's in the charter, or whether it's coming from a recommendation from the transition committee to be adopted in an ordinance. So.
But even the recommendation from the transition committee, council is still adopting, so council still has to deal with the reality is that they're setting their salary. And
Yeah,
even though it's
but
not theirs, I realize
Right.
there's it's
And
whatever.
that's only
but-
going to be the first time.
Right.
Do we have the same paragraph for
For council?
Homestead mayor and other council members and the controller? So all of them are in that same. Okay.
Everybody's there.
Yeah.
And we'll decide if the controllers.
But I'm, I guess I'm okay, but I think it's more problematic there.
But you're
When we discussed it the
'Cause you
last
think
time,
they'll set
I
it
was
too
the
high or
only
too
one
low?
who could see a difference between the mayor and the council, so. And I basically went along with it.
No matter what they say, I'll raise eventually.
But we seem to have a change of heart anyway, so I know where that's going.
I mean, I think you can argue both ways. I agree with you, having people set their own salaries becomes very difficult, but I think we've said this a number of times, at some point, you're gonna have to make the tough vote, right? You're gonna have to make a decision, and we can't keep predicting, what that's gonna look like, so.
It wouldn't be a problem for us to do that. I mean, it's nothing we couldn't do. My favorite rule may be the Dave Duncan rule. When in doubt, leave it out.
You go to the door.
You got one vote.
You have a rule.
You missed a meeting. What is that one meeting that you
Dave
missed?
Duncan rule from now on.
me and Mark Twain.
All right.
Okay, so city council remain silent as well? Okay, now your third topic.
Term limits.
You started it.
I know, but I'm a steadfast believer. I think it's appropriate for a constitution. I think a lot of the problems we have at a lot of levels of government are people staying around too long. My proposal, I feel comfortable with a 12-year number combined.
12 years.
Yeah,
Combined which way? You mean?
between council and mayor.
So if you're on council, it limits how long you can be a mayor?
Throwing it out there.
I think the two are unrelated. I think linking them together can be problematic.
Okay.
I would agree with Richard on that.
Is there anything in third-class cities, Larry, that prohibits somebody from staying on too long? I mean, is there any rulings? I mean,
No.
nothing statewide, nothing election-wide?
Not under the third-class city code.
And after having had Mayor Pawlowski here, I think, what's he on, his third or fourth?
Don't remember.
I'm pretty sure he was close to his fourth
I think
term.
he's running for his third. But it doesn't matter.
And I've often heard it said that term limits are best described by the voters. I'm not sure that we actually have to, once again,
What's that mean?
why?
What's that mean?
He's saying you don't need term limits, the voters will throw you out if you're not doing the job.
Exactly. Yeah, if we're of the ilk that we shouldn't be writing stuff that we don't need to write, why
I
do
would
it?
write that in.
Did we find something you want?
But once he
All of
does
a
it,
sudden, he's like, yeah, I want that in.
Yeah, I do.
I think one of the comments I would want to make is I think there's a lot of levels in government where I'd like to see term limits. I certainly agree with you on that. But, you know, I get back to the all politics is local kind of thing. When we start talking really local politics, I think the game changes quite a bit. Because, I mean, these are not expensive races to run. Usually, you know, people don't even file campaign finance forms because they're under the 250 or whatever level, you know. So it's not like, you know, you have this incumbency where it's really tough to tack on, you know, to attack the incumbency because of money. That's not these races.
So we also heard about Erie where the mayor was there for what, 30 some.
1966 to 1980.
Well, I think, you know, I think it's also plausible that sometimes you might have someone who does the job really well and people like it, you know, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's a bad thing when, I don't know, it becomes this thing where someone's there and it's almost by default they're gonna be the one there, no matter what, because it's impossible to challenge
Well,
them.
see, here's
but,
what
but I can't see a mayor being.
In my mind, I'm not sure why I do. I draw a distinction between city council and mayor. Like, I'm not as opposed because I feel that in this new situation especially, you know, city council is sort of more of a service to the city, and if you're willing to put your name out there as one of those 6 people to be in service on city council, but then I see mayor as more like, you know, maybe after 12 years it's time to maybe give another city councilman who maybe wouldn't oppose you because you're still running for mayor, but, you know, maybe is just as well qualified or maybe would bring some fresh ideas to that position. But if the mayor's there and that's somebody they've supported for a number of years, aren't willing to necessarily run against them. So I don't know. I'm sort of drawing a line between unrestricted city council and a restricted mayor, but that kind of brings you to the presidential sort of situation. We have a restricted president, but then the House of Representatives are there for 30, 40 years. But
I think
Well,
12,
other than drawing the federal analogy,
yeah, no,
which I don't
that
want
blows
to
the whole
draw.
thing apart.
I kind of see
Right
the
now.
way you see that, and I could maybe go along with that. So
I think 12 years is way too long. I think the mayor should not be more than 8 years. And council, I would agree with you that council may be different. Maybe 12 years for council. But I think mandated change is good. I think term limits are essential for effective government. I think voting, I'm not sure that participative democracy provides, how shall I say this?
carefully.
Yes. I think term limits are essential, and I would recommend 8 for the mayor and 12 for council.
They don't put themselves in the hot seat.
completely taking a
One's
completely
no longer.
different approach with this topic than anything else. We wanna write something in and everything
Well,
else.
because I
is
feel
wondering.
very strongly about the.
We finally
term
found a hot
limits.
button for them.
I think I was a big fan of doing performance evaluation.
Yeah, that's true. You want that in there,
So
but we
Larry
can't.
says, oh, no, you can't do that, you gotta unelect them. Well, okay, I want to unelect them.
But again, like you said though, we're kind of treading new ground here, or, you know, whatever, and moving into a full-time mayor and that type of thing. We've never had that before in the city, so maybe we would think differently once we've kind of gotten into that and find somebody who's really, you know, driving the economy of the city and doing great things, and now he can't run again. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. I'm not saying I'm in
never
favor
believed
either way,
that- I
but.
never believed that one person is the solution, that there are other people very capable of.
I agree with that, but isn't it the leader a lot of times who draws in all those other capable people, and sometimes that person's more important than,
In New York, the last 2 or 3 mayoral election cycles, they've always said we can't do without the last guy, and then
Yeah.
they seem to do just fine with the next guy.
I think we fall prey to the great man syndrome, that some great person syndrome. Some great person is gonna come in with dynamic leadership, and we will not wanna get rid of that person? I don't think so. I think everybody wears out. 8 years for the mayor,
that's your eight.
8 years, 2
Yeah,
terms.
I actually agree with Wayne, and maybe 12 is too low, maybe you tack on 4 more and say 16 combined. Meaning
I'm
within
hearing-
city council and mayor.
I actually have
To
been,
combine.
I don't know if I'd combine it hearing what these guys have to say. Plus, I just looked back and thought of my own experience, it's a different job. It really is. Even under the current form of government, it's a different job.
You're saying mayor versus speaker, not just the council. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we can
I
always put
mean-
something in there, and then we have public comment, plus we're going to have council make comment too, right, at some point? So it's something that we
Yeah, they
could,
could address
we
it in
could put
public
something
hearing
in and
if
then
they
we can-
choose to do
Right.
so.
So I kind of like having the no limits for council and maybe 3.
3
I can
terms
see
is a
the
good
3. I can
placeholder,
see
I
the
think, at
3,
this
yeah.
point, sort of halfway between the 8 and the 16. Or it is exactly halfway between the 8 and the
Yeah, right.
16. I think it's a
Yeah.
good place to start and then see how the comments.
I'm okay with that.
So no limits for council and how many for mayor on
3
I
terms.
agree.
3 terms?
3 4 terms, 4-year terms, 3 4-year terms,
Correct.
with performance evaluation.
Yeah, well, every 4 years, they have a
Every
performance
4 years.
evaluation, I
He's
said.
saying it,
And it's going to be very
Look how
quantitative.
It
It's
must
a
be
number, it's a
He's
number.
little things like that. He
Transparent.
perked up.
It's a go, no-go.
It's like a kid when he had
And what are the
like,
sanctions for non-performance?
Thrown out of
Well,
office,
thrown out.
finds a new job. There's no middle ground here.
None
no
of us
room
would
for
run a
improvement.
Yeah, there's
company
no-
like this. None of us
Off
would
with
run
your
a
head.
company like this.
No suit for you.
That's the second Dave Duncan rule.
Who?
When in doubt, throw him out.
Hey,
Throw it out.
I appreciate that, but I don't know about that.
What about the case where the mayor dies? Halfway through his term, somebody's appointed.
That's in here, isn't it?
Oh, I don't think that's, it's usually 3 elected terms, they can be elected.
Re-elected. Re-elected, okay. That's how we choose.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
What, do we address how the new mayor gets appointed? Or do we need to?
That's state law.
I thought it says, doesn't it say in there what we do?
How-
Well, the election law.
Right now, the optional plan law tells us, and the third-class city code told us, I don't know if any of these charters are.
It's not in those, but they're in the optional plan.
What's that?
It's not addressed in those, but it is addressed in the optional plan, Larry.
Right.
What you're talking about.
I know it is. I don't know if I saw it.
I think it's in,
In the general?
it'll fall back, it'll
What's
fall
that?
back to the
I
third
can
class
check.
city code. It's quiet, right?
No, because we're done with
Do a
it.
abolish
All
it?
right.
It's in the optional
Right.
plan.
So after this will be if they get arrested for a felony or if they die.
Can you just maybe look at that for some of
It's happened in a couple states.
We'll worry about it.
Can we
What
mention
are we
any
asking, like what the
instances?
process of the election is, or what?
Do we need to have like a special election? Who's the interim mayor?
If someone,
It would shock me though, it's not in any of these charters, so there's an obvious answer.
it must be, yes.
But let's say you're 1 year in, do we have a special election the next 1 year? Do we wait 3 years till the next election cycle, I guess is what we're asking.
And that's what Wayne is saying, it's not addressed in these, so it must be under maybe the election
It's
law.
somewhere where.
Okay, so you'll let us know. We don't need to waste time
I have
debating
not
it.
looked at that, so I couldn't review it.
That's okay.
Okay, next up is, names and boundaries.
Follow Farrell, see if anything's necessary in there.
Alright, so, names and boundaries, page 1.
Yeah, it's right there.
So why do we need that?
I don't know. Larry, can you tell us if we need to name the city again?
I think it's really silly.
I do too. Like, well, we don't know where we live, we know what we're doing.
You want to rename the city?
No, it has a name.
Duncanville.
Duncanville.
Didn't we what do we name the city for today?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, we already did that, that was fun. We're not doing that again.
And that was our only cardboard check, and it was money to the city.
How much was it?
Yeah, that was great fun.
25 grand.
We'll rename it every day for 25,000.
We can sell naming rights for 5,000.
We did, but we do it every day.
They actually did that, so they, in Farrell at least, so they could say city means this throughout the charter. Yeah, the city of Altoona here.
You recommend we
I
do
did,
that?
I did,
Okay.
yeah, I did.
That's fine.
Okay.
If there's some reason to do it, let's do it.
There is.
Okay.
Because now we can say, in the charter, we see city, that means city of Altoona.
Okay.
So, paragraph 101, you'll just modify it
Yes.
to be the same. 102, necessary to define what the city is.
Well, I would say the boundaries of the city shall include the township of Logan.
Amen.
Well,
Don't put that, you better
let's just say
keep
the
that
outer
scratch
bounds of the
from
city
his-
of Altoona
I
and
know what
all
the
that falls
headline is.
within
It's
it.
been nice knowing you, Wayne.
We're gonna have
I just
to,
thought we could sneak it in there, so everyone just be
He's a
quiet.
refugee of the city. He
Yeah.
can't leave the city limits now.
Hope you send Linda
Get
out.
across
Get
the border.
stuff.
He'll have to go
She'll
where
get
where it's
crushed.
Allegheny Township, he'll have to leave south.
I'm in someplace warm if I go
do you want to create a paragraph about a standing army as well?
That's your police force.
Okay.
Okay, do we need,
I would leave boundaries in, I think that's a nice
Okay.
technical thing.
and then when the charter would become effective, do we need,
Well, that's,
we do
I think
need-
you guys have to talk about that with your transition.
So put it in there and just leave that blank.
Yeah.
It won't be the first Monday of January 1976.
so it could potentially be 15.
I think if they tell you one after the election, you guys are gonna have to determine how.
No, it would need to be 2016 because we need to elect a mayor before it would
The
actually.
mayor's an odd-year election, so it'd have to happen in 15.
For the
Right, so it would
primary.
be 2016.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Well,
this is
Larry-
meeting the day too.
I know, but
He works at Penn State, he's good, right?
knowing the charter was, say, ratified, and knowing it was going to change these positions, would you preemptively run before the charter became effective, so that on the day the charter became effective, the new government was in place, or would you make it effective prior to that, knowing it's going to take some time to transition into that?
I think you would do it after it's ratified, after you know the voters are going.
No, you know the voters. Okay, so what we're saying is the primary would be in May of 15.
That's right.
Would you make this effective January of 15, knowing that the mayor that we have outlined, that new position, wouldn't come into power until January 1st of 16? Or they're saying, would you just line everything up on January 1st of 16, everything goes into effect on that day?
It'd probably make more sense.
But can you run for a position that isn't
Yeah,
there for an effective charter yet, knowing that everything will
Because
line back up?
it won't take effect until January 1. If they know when that's the effect.
Isn't the plan that this is voted on in the fall election this year, though, right?
November, but we
Yeah.
still have to, if they vote on it, whatever, November 4th, 5th, whatever that is, we then would have to get the transition,
It's not until May and
well,
that
but
doesn't need to be.
you start circulating petitions,
Well, as soon as
February.
but as soon as on November 5th,
Right.
people who are potentially thinking about mayor, they're gonna know. And then they're gonna already start planning whether we formed a
But if there's other,
transition committee or not. They're already, I would assume.
But I think-
if there's other provisions, not mayor's side, that would be useful, couldn't they go into effect January 1st of 15?
I
And then
think
the
it
other
would be-
things would just fall behind and happen.
Here's what the home rule law says. Whenever the electors, by a majority of those voting on the question, vote in favor of adopting a change in their form of government pursuant to this subpart. Okay, so they adopt, let's go to the home rule charter. The proposed form shall take effect according to its terms and the provisions of this subpart. So the terms would be, I think, what you set out in the transition committee. And if you want to say newly elected council members come in 2016, fine. But it sounds like the mayor, don't forget you're going to have all positions already there. The mayor would become a council person, I believe, under the charter. That's how they work.
But my question is there advantages in the year of 2015 to stripping away the third class city code, even though
No, I see what you mean. Yes,
our,
there would be.
even though our
I think-
mayor and our council changes can't necessarily take place until 2016?
Yes, and I think the transition committee could say that in the plan.
That these provisions can take place in 15, that the charter is effective January 1st of 15. These provisions can take place up to 16, but the new mayor and the new organization of council doesn't happen until the elections happen for January of 16.
That's actually fairly smart if we can do that.
I think you could.
There's certain things, the transition committee is going to have to lay out what can and cannot happen
'Cause you get
during
rid
the
of
transition
city
year
code,
of
That's a good
Third class
idea,
city
yeah.
code, get rid of the tax structure, all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
a year
Yeah,
earlier.
I tell you, earlier.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then let the mayor fall in the normal election cycle in
Because
in
you'll have
16.
positions there.
Mhm.
You'll still have, I guess, your council mayor form of government until 16.
And you'll know what's going on with the controller at that
Yeah.
point when those elections come, and all those things will be effective.
Of
So
course,
I think making it
wonder when
effective.
DC's term is up. I don't even,
18.
He just got,
I wonder where he would become. We have to look at that.
If we abolish his position.
Right, because then they like to.
We may have to run all the way out, we may have to offer to run all the way out to 18.
You may have to.
Well, we
Just
just
get
have-
rid of them.
So it'll be a
Just have to
long
pay.
transition.
He just has to be paid. He just has to be paid.
Right. You wouldn't have to be- You can't reduce their salary.
But he doesn't have to have the job, he just has to be paid. That's what I'm saying.
But that could just be a long transition on that one
It might be
particular
good to
line
have
item.
oversight once in a while.
But you might
Yeah,
as well
a
use
transition.
Well,
Yeah.
let me propose maybe you take a look at that, because that's, places have eliminated it, so somebody has this answer.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, I can look at that. You, as to whether, what happens to
What
somebody.
happens?
Sorry for my construction
No, I-
scheduling
And
stuff.
it's only
always,
the problem with the
No,
control.
coming out.
I think that's a smart idea.
Yeah.
Taking a look at whether or not.
Giving them as much flexibility as you can, even though it's going to take a year to maybe, we're hearing 3 or 4 years to fully implement.
Put the benefits in place right away and get the politics to catch up to it.
Yeah.
So that would only affect the controller though. That, we don't have a problem because council.
We're not changing the number of councils.
Yeah.
Some of these places, it took a long time just because they
Imagine.
really figured how many councilmen they had, and it took a long time to phase in or phase out.
Okay? Names, boundaries, and effective date.
Next one, powers of the city. You'll love this one too.
You need that.
We get all the power that they say we can't have, basically, is that what that says? I like 201.
I'd suggest you put that in.
Yeah, we get all the powers they didn't take from us already.
I like that too.
Yeah, I agree. O3 is good, but I think the Intergovernmental Cooperation Act also takes care of that. It covers however municipality.
So you recommend it's in
But,
or
but
out?
it's nice to let them know that you want that to go on, right?
Yeah.
It's one of many activities that might be nice to mention, probably some that are not mentioned.
Isn't 204 sort of overlap with 201?
204 on page 3? Are you on page?
Page 2, I guess.
Oh,
What are we
what
talking,
do you
general
want?
powers? Article 2, aren't
Oh, you're.
Well, they're saying the powers invested in council.
Oh, where we go
Yeah, he's using the federal charter.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, okay, why would you not be using the draft?
Because we don't have these aren't in the draft
It's
yet.
not in the draft.
They will be next time.
Powers of the city was there,
Yeah.
and government.
Oh, yeah, we did. We already did that part.
Yep.
A long time ago.
But not the residual powers
yeah,
of the city
government.
council, that's.
Some of it's there, but not all
Oh,
of it.
sorry, I didn't mean to do it twice.
No, I'm sorry, I forgot I had it in there.
Oh, sorry.
Good.
I'm glad we came up with the same answer twice.
Yeah, governmental's in there, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I figured you wanted it in because you wrote it in.
Well, no, but that was different because we were doing Easton last
This is
time.
Easton.
Yeah.
But
It looks like
they did, they did pretty much
Easton
complete
was feral
draft.
too.
Yeah, that's right. But they didn't include the residual powers, though. We should just throw that in as catch-all.
Well, when we were talking about
So are you
boundaries, we
changing
were
it to Farrell's language then?
Boundaries?
I prefer barrels, but that's just.
Do you want Farrell? I can put Farrell's in there.
Article 1 and Article 2. My question was on Farrell, the 201 and the 204, aren't they?
Well, 204 is actually saying that the power resides in council. The 201 is saying that the city has all these powers.
Okay.
So I kind of like that. actually.
Then it trickles the city down to
Yes.
the council.
How the city's acting now.
Okay. If you like it, we don't need anything else.
Okay, so you want me to replace Article 1?
With this Article 1 and then Article, we're gonna have to figure out the
Article
numbering
1 and 2,
system.
yeah.
Yeah,
We have to figure out the numbering system at some point.
which will probably involve us saying, Larry, put a number system.
You're gonna have to live with this for the next how many years that they keep putting you in place.
Make it logical.
Person us out for years to come.
No, he's happy that we just didn't make it only be him. He got his 2 cents in last meeting. We allowed it to be a firm instead of just a person.
That's right. They just changed the third-class city code to allow the same thing.
They're following us.
And the last thing we have is ordinances and resolutions.
You're right, whatever amount of time we have, we fill it up. What page is it on? There's no pages, what
So,
subsection?
5. Article V.
Okay, what do we need to say and what don't we need to say here, Larry?
Well, this, Tyrone does this also, I don't know whether the others do this. This is, your statement is what you think needs to occur by ordinance.
If we didn't say anything, what would happen?
If you didn't say anything, then I think council would have this decision whether to do it by resolution or ordinance. Ordinances usually are advertised, so people know what's going on, so they can come in and, you know, say to council, no, I don't think you should be doing that, or yes, I think you should be doing that. Resolutions usually aren't advertised. It's just something that's resolved by council. You don't go out and get advertisement.
So these 11 things say you must be more formal with these
Yes.
11 things. If it's not on this list, they can do it by resolution.
Yes. Or our ordinance, but they, you know.
It's their own choice.
Yes, at that
If it's not on this list, they have the choice of doing it either way.
Mhm.
These 11 things, it forces them to be formal
Yes.
on these 11 things. But if we remain silent, they can be formal or informal on all of it.
And Tyrone, if you.
Mr. Sayles, which way would you like to go?
I wouldn't list 11 things.
You would.
So which one you go
I would
cross
not.
off? Or are you just gonna go one run-on sentence, so it's only one thing?
No, I wouldn't
Well, I
do
think,
that.
I think they need to go through the formal process to adopt an annual budget and capital program. I can't imagine that.
Do we wanna go down the list and
Done
see if
by
they
this
think they're
time.
things we wanna have ordinance for?
Yeah,
to you.
let's do that.
I think it's smart.
Okay, so number 1, we think that should be there.
Yes. So I'll put an
Yes.
okay after that one.
Number 2 looks pretty
What is
important.
Could you read them?
Yep.
So
Adopt or amend an administrative code or establish, alter, or abolish any city department, office, or agency.
That's actually number 2.
which is what I thought we were
Yeah,
on.
no, we
They want
adopted
number
it.
Yeah,
one.
Bill was asking what they
Oh.
Adopt or amend an annual budget and capital program is number one. I have an extra copy here if you want.
Here's one, too.
You have it now?
I might.
What did I do with it?
Is it for Bill? I
Yeah,
don't
it's
have
it for
one.
Bill. Oh, that's right.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, number 2 was administrative code, abolish state departments, offices, or agencies.
Are you okay with that?
Yes?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, they'll probably adopt it by ordinance, and you have to amend it by ordinance, so it makes sense.
Adopt or amend a code establishing a personnel system for the city. Is that,
We have that now.
I don't think we have.
That's on page 9 of our draft as a separate section under administrative
The
departments.
city has a personnel code adopted by ordinance, but it's for non-uniform or non-union.
This would force them for everybody, but we might have already done that. Well, page 9.
Page 9 of the
Personnel system.
red, black, and blue document, the Larry.
Yes, we do have a personnel system. It says by ordinance, so you do need to maybe be consistent then. Council shall establish by ordinance a personnel system for the city. Systems established shall be based on merit principles
Did you put that?
and other recommendations submitted by the city manager. So there again, do they have one currently?
They have personnel.
Because these are the things that if they did not, the transition committee would have to help them establish one.
They
prior.
do, yes, and the personnel policy affects mostly non-uniform, non-union. But if it's not in the CBA, the collective bargaining agreements, it affects uniform also. So that's kind of nice,
So leave 3 in,
yes.
4.
Could somebody read it?
Provide for a fine or other penalty or establish a rule or regulation for violation of which a fine or other penalty is imposed, except for fines of less than $1 per violation.
Seen that.
Oh, that's good. That is a micro.
Can we get rid of that except for?
I would
That's,
suggest that, yeah. The rest of it is
Yeah, I
probably.
think you want an ordinance if you're gonna,
Impose fines.
yeah, notice issues. Levy taxes is number 5.
Yes.
Oddly enough, the township code, you don't have to have an ordinance to levy taxes.
I think it's probably not a bad idea.
Interesting, yeah. But
Grant, renew, or extend a franchise.
currently they're done by ordinance.
What is a franchise?
Like cable television franchise, it's done by ordinance.
Is there one other than that? It's the only one I can think of.
Yeah, it's the only one I can put too. Well, yes, it's the only one.
Is IRC considered something like that?
That's a council of governments, and that needs to be by ordinance.
Well, is there anything else you want to put there to make it more applicable, or is that
No,
good
I
enough?
guess it has to be there almost, because I think the law regarding that requires the ordinance.
Well,
We've always done them by ordinance.
okay. I don't think it hurts to have too many on this list. They'll just make them be formal if that's the case, right?
You don't do that for, what,
Very
13-year franchise agreements usually.
Establish, alter, or abolish rates charged for any utility or other service supplied by the city.
No, you don't. This would be if you had
If
your
you had a
sewer
water
and
thing.
water. You would do that by ordinance usually. Authorities do it by resolutions, but they don't have to advertise resolution.
Or if they have trash service.
Trash.
So take it out.
You're sitting awful close to make that comment.
That's the awesome
So could we,
That was the eye.
So is anyone asking that to be scratched?
Well, if they're going to do it, I think it should be an ordinance. That doesn't mean you should or shouldn't. Leave it.
Okay.
Authorize the borrowing of money.
It has to be.
I think that's needed
Yeah.
there.
Does do right
convey or lease or authorize the conveyance or lease of any lands of the city. Why does that have to?
Well, conveying, selling, so if you're gonna sell off properties in the city, you need to do that with an ordinance.
So the city owns an extra, I mean, we have like this land bank stuff. That's,
So
if
that
somebody
there's,
wants to buy it, why do we need an ordinance on that?
to make sure the public is aware of it, I think, then we have an issue.
What about leasing? I mean, if somebody wants, if somebody comes to us and says, hey, I want to lease a park,
You're saying the city manager can handle that without having an ordinance?
we could do it by resolution with council instead of a full-blown ordinance.
Well, you know, you can look at it from two sides. One is that it could be, we could be talking about something in the land bank, you know, some foreclosed on empty blank lot somewhere that's pretty silly. And I think we could probably agree that maybe you don't need to go through hoops to do that. But at the same time, it could be Highland Park. And so, yeah, that had better be an ordinance. So,
How you draw the line?
and that's right, and I don't know how you can separate those two things.
My most land bank is owned by the redevelopment authority, which is technically the city.
Well,
So I mean, Highland
said
Park
that-
isn't owned by
but,
the
but
redevelopment.
there may
Authority
be
has
some,
control of that,
so
it's not
find
the city.
whatever parcel
Yeah.
fits what I'm describing, though, I'm sure there are many.
Most city-owned land is owned by the redevelopment authority.
All the parks?
Yeah, the parks are all city.
Easement parts, I
Well,
mean,
that's why it isn't Highland Park.
quitclaim deed is.
The attorney said,
Oh,
Usually what the
Quick
city
claim.
does is convey anything it wants to sell to the redevelopment authority.
right.
They would have to do that, if we left this in, they would have to do that by ordinance, but the redevelopment authority would not be handcuffed by this requirement.
Right.
Right.
So it wouldn't change
Yeah.
much.
It's the main reason they use redevelopment authority now, is supposed to was.
And that way, when you, yeah, so
So
that makes perfect sense then. You know, where the city would be deciding, you know, hey, we want to see this developed, but when they're going out trying to find a buyer, they can move quickly once they find that person.
Once they put it over.
some Little League comes to us and wants to rent, or wants to lease a park, and run the Little League through a city park.
We do lease it.
Well, maybe we take out the lease, maybe we just leave convey.
These would be leasing by resolution.
Well, maybe we just take out the lease part,
You can.
just leave the conveyance by ordinance to take the lease out.
Someone has to want to ordinance because somebody wants to take care of our parks for us.
Why couldn't, it- this is just a suggestion, why couldn't it be only if you're conveying to other than an authority that you would need an ordinance? Because you would assume if we're conveying to our redevelopment authority or to our water authority, that that's for public use. They'll do it.
I think the convey should, I see no reason why we really have to change the convey part.
The only reason I'm saying that, Richard,
It's a good check and
the only
balance.
reason I'm saying that is, some of these pieces of property that we have, they go to the redevelopment authority, they're like junk property, and they're only worth like $100, and now we're doing an ordinance that costs us $150 to, do you understand what I mean?
I get that, but we're also going to decrease the cost of what it takes to do an ordinance when we get into the publicizing part of it, so I don't think it's gonna cost that much to do an ordinance under the new charter.
What does an ordinance cost in advertising?
Depends how long it is.
Zoning,
Anywhere
for
from,
zoning change, it's over 1,000.
It's $1,500 if you wanna do a zoning change.
anywhere from $200 up, probably.
So you could be talking a $300, $500 advertising bill for a $100 piece of property.
One of the biggest problems with zoning changes, people don't wanna pay for them, it's not, it's not a good idea.
What was the issue that, everyone came to a city council meeting, they were upset about a right of way being sold? Is that near Manson?
Yeah, that was that little piece of Oneida Avenue, between Oneida and whatever the other avenue was. That empty lot that had a storm sewer running through the middle of it anyway, so you
But
couldn't
that-
build on it, and so.
The city didn't sell that to the redevelopment authority.
Yeah.
did. The city conveyed it to the redevelopment authority, the redevelopment authority sold it.
Right, and when it was conveyed to the redevelopment authority, it was at a public meeting with.
Right.
So I mean, that was publicized, just nobody paid attention to it, so it's gone.
And the owner paid for the advertising, the person that purchased the property.
Yes.
That was billed to to the person, they paid for it. 'Cause it,
It's a release of any lands of the city.
for including it.
I kinda wanna just take out lease unless somebody shows me a reason not to, because I don't think they do it now.
Well, and then the other thing is, do we want to make an exception if it's, as Larry may have suggested, to other authorities that it does not need to be advertised at that point?
That makes it nice for the city. I can see if you're selling it to a developer, hey, that should go, our public notice, people should know. But you're giving it to one of your authorities, and that's, you
But-
create the.
Well,
We
I
can't
think- but I
give it
think
to the
we've also-
authority and just to give it to the developer, though, isn't that?
Well, sometimes.
That's exactly what it is.
Sometimes.
It's just, yeah, I see this as a middleman, so we're gonna get around this by giving it to someone else who's already pretty much promised it to someone else. And we've also made it easier for the council to put the council on the authority, right? Isn't that what we did?
Yes.
So this is very much,
Well-
I think, getting around these rules. So I think that's an abuse of what the rule is.
I didn't say it to abuse the rule.
No, I know that, but I'm saying it sets it up to
Having
be abused.
worked with these things,
Yeah.
it's difficult sometimes when you have to go through an ordinance that seems so
Yeah.
simple.
Well, I mean, yeah, but the
At
ordinance
least
is
take
this.
the leases out. I
Yeah,
would think.
well-
Yeah, I definitely think take the leases out.
So are there ways where I could, Little League, I'm fine, this where, again, I think there's lots of cases where reasonable people can agree on what reasonable things should be allowed, but we're also setting up technical rules here, so what are some of the ways that at least can be used?
Don't forget, this still has to be a council meeting, public council meeting, so people will know what's going on.
It still has to be.
But the resolution can occur very quickly.
Yes.
And that's the whole point. And so I think sometimes things, there may be, I don't know, a desire to do something very quickly. Hope that
Where does
the
this stand
Firestone
now
guys
with third
don't-
class city
yeah.
code? This particular issue, there's no,
Yeah.
this is more regulation than what currently exists?
Yes.
This whole sentence, whether or not the leases are in.
What it says in the third class city code, and it's in, I noticed it's in here. The third class city code, it takes prior public notice. I should take that back. You have to advertise if you're bidding out property, right? I mean, if you're gonna sell property, it has to be advertised. So it is, everybody has notice of it.
What about leasing in the third class code?
It's really odd, the way that it's worded. You can read it that you have to, if you read you don't have to. To be safe, you can. But
Well, I mean, number 9 is the first one we got to where we were worried about the cost of it, but the 1 through 7 or 1 through 8 that we already went over, those are either already required or commonly are done via ordinance. We didn't add any additional costs or burden by doing those. So 9 is really the first one that was potentially adding additional burden.
If it's just a cost thing, ordinances requiring public notice, sorry, I flipped the page. It looks like it's saying that only certain ordinances require the prior public notice. So perhaps we can put in there something about, that some don't, or, however we phrase that. So perhaps this idea that leasing, because as I agree, I think some things we want to make a little bit easier to do. So maybe we can leave the leasing thing in there, but make it where it doesn't require a public notice. And the other aspect of this is that this specifically refers to published in a newspaper circulating in the city. Certainly, I have seen many of the other charters which say it can be publicized in other ways, and so I'm hoping we can be flexible with that, such as publishing it on the city website. Frankly, I think would be a wonderful way to make all this stuff much cheaper.
This is very similar to Tyrone's. If you notice, ordinances can be adopted, and then after adoption, that's when they're published, not prior to. That's why 505 says these are the ordinances that require prior public notice. So, you know, if you whip up an ordinance for that night, you can get it passed, but you just have to publish it within, what do they say here, 30 days. That's what Tyrone has. So Farrell does it the same way. But if you're going to do zoning or subdivision, land development, new taxes, they all have to have prior.
That's interesting.
That's how we do that now.
No, we do prior.
On every-
We do
All of them are prior.
prior to adoption, yeah.
And we don't advertise after.
Well, I mean, this whole section, are we saying too much, saying too little, necessary, not necessary, good guideline, bad guideline? Don't know enough to
Yeah.
necessarily
Well,
have
I think one of the bullet points that I probably was understood when we were all talking about this with levy taxes, authorized borrowing of money, all that kind of stuff, is that we want to make sure these are done
in a very formal.
in a formal, methodical way where everybody knows.
And the public will have notice.
Yeah, and they know in advance. So that
Well,
they
not
can-
in advance. That's what
Well,
I'm
I
saying.
know, but I'm kind of saying that I think that was the intent of us, or at least that was my understanding, is that those things would be done with prior public notice. The public would know that's going to be discussed. How does it normally happen? Something comes to a meeting, it has to be proposed at a meeting, and then it would get voted on a month later at another meeting, right?
Well, what I'm
No,
thinking
you
of
have-
right now, what about
you
when
have
we
to introduce-
refinance bond issues because we have a low interest rate that may go up next
See,
week?
that's under the Unit Debt Act.
Okay.
That's under the, we have to follow that act. That's applicable to everybody. But right now, under the third-class city code, ordinances have to be introduced at one meeting, at least 3 days have to elapse, and then you can adopt the ordinance at the next meeting. But usually all ordinances require 7 days advertisement, so you can't do it until the next meeting. But they have to be introduced before.
Right.
they're
And that's the
Here
general
they
thing
don't
that I
have to.
had in my mind. So I'm kind of not wanting to deviate from that, from a lot of these things.
But
which-
most don't have the introduction part of ordinance adoptions. The third-class city, I'm sorry, the second-class township code doesn't, borough codes, Tyrone Home Rule Charter doesn't. Only the third-class city code requires this introduction, at one meeting, adoption at the next meeting.
Mhm.
So, it kind of slows the process down.
Yeah, and, yeah.
Yeah, I guess what I'm looking at is, not making it more burdensome, obviously, than third-class city code, but trying to stay potentially somewhat in line with it in this particular case. Less is better, but we haven't got to any we want to eliminate. Which one did you want to eliminate?
It's like I said in the beginning, I'm not sure I have any of it.
We could give them a little too much power.
Yeah. I'm worried about what they might do one night, and it would literally be one night. I think, and I'm, in general, and maybe it's just ridiculous to even say this, is I think there's just very few things where government has to move so quickly that they have to make something happen let's even pick, 30 days. I mean, there's very few things where things really have to happen in 30 days. I think government should be more methodical about what they do and think ahead
But I
and
don't
plan
want
things
to
out.
increase the cost just for the sake of increasing the cost either.
Which is
So-
why I like the
Yeah.
idea of advertising
Yeah,
on the
well,
web.
I
I
would
mean,
agree with
let's
that.
get rid of what costs money, but I don't want to get rid of what's methodical about it.
I'll put in whatever you want.
Well, where we are is on number 9.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And I guess the question
Well,
is.
the problem with number 9 is there's little leases and little conveyances, and there's big leases and big conveyances.
That's
That's
right.
kind of where we're stuck.
That's right. Yeah, I mean.
Can I say,
Yeah.
why don't we leave this in, because I kind of leaning, I want some, and have Larry report back to us in a month, or the next meeting, to see if there's a problem with taking the lease out. We're good with that.
Okay, next.
Like, how many properties do you think we lease now?
think it depends on how you define the lease too, because what if people wanna lease, like, the downtown,
Heritage Plaza.
thank you, it's been a while, Heritage Plaza for
You might be
concert.
this faster, or monuments.
Is that a lease? If you
Yeah.
hold an event in the band shell down there, that's considered a lease?
Mhm.
You know, we might give that to somebody to manage for us, I
We
can't
do.
remember. But I mean, Highland Park
Because
is-
that would be a great example of something that needs to move quickly.
It
But
doesn't take approval, it takes approval of the city manager, and there's all kinds of things required, like insurance and what else.
so maybe the idea
Noise
is that there's a
ordinance.
short-term lease. Short-term leases can be approved quickly, but anything
What's
with.
considered
Well, you want to,
short-term?
well, he doesn't want to lease Highland Park for a shopping mall for the next 100 years.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be a lease.
That's right, and that's exactly,
Yeah,
that's
well, I know what you're
exactly.
saying.
But I'm sure we could draw many analogies.
Yeah.
So maybe a short-term lease is, I mean, like
Well,
the Little
again-
League, that's a couple of months, so maybe anything more than a couple of months.
Make it for the usual.
Let's just get a report back from
Yeah.
10
Larry and
years,
move
or
on.
10-year leases.
As to whether or not we need.
I think at both the extremes, we agree this doesn't need to be in here, but we think it needs to be there in the big, but trying to
We wanna
draw
make
that.
sure-
And if it's a longer lease,
They are
then,
10 years.
then we can go through the more methodical 1-month plan and do that.
Adopt with or without amendments
1 year,
ordinances
$10,000.
proposed under the initiative power.
It's all work.
Wait, are you on those things?
Yeah.
I'm trying to be.
Okay.
So what's that mean?
I have not a
I
clue in the
don't know
world.
what the initiative.
So let's not include it.
Okay, you got.
Oh, well, that's good.
We're down to the- we're down to the 10.
Understand?
No, that's under the initiative thing.
Maybe it's a referendum.
And so, the idea is that citizens come up with some idea for an ordinance, and they petition for like a single hauler, they come up with a petition and send it to
Make another trash.
council. What's that?
Make another.
So you're saying they can preemptively, in this case, they can preemptively take an initiative and just adopt it before it ever.
They could bring this to council, and council has an opportunity to say, you know what, you're right, we should do this, and then council does it instead.
Well, I guess I'm
instead of the
misunderstanding.
citizens.
We'll handle initiatives and referendums later,
That's
right?
I think we will.
I was confused as to whether initiatives and referendums would just to make amendments to the charter, or whether they also can change ordinances.
The way they have it written, it looks like it's any ordinance.
Okay, so we'll discuss that later. We don't want to get into that. We'll shelf that until,
When we get to that section.
yeah.
So we're not including this right now.
Not right now until we,
Okay.
but make a note, just
It may or may not need to be
when
in.
we get
I'll
there,
put
when we
question
decide
marks
to ask
after
that,
that.
stuck back in. 11, and lastly, amend or repeal any ordinance previously adopted unless such previous ordinance action could have been taken by resolution or motion.
It's basically in kind. If it was put in by ordinance, it needs to be taken out by ordinance. If it was in by resolution, it could be taken out by resolution.
And that's ordinarily the case.
Yeah.
5 minutes, folks. What page and a half to go. General ordinance requirements, form and procedure.
So we need
Or is that necessary?
Yeah,
That,
I
change
agree.
that first sentence, it's just wrong grammatically.
Can I read it out loud?
Sure, I guess. Every proposed ordinance introduced in writing and in the form required, excuse me. Every proposed ordinance introduced in writing and in the form required for final adoption. To me, that's not a sentence. There's no verb. No,
Is that a requirement?
yeah. No ordinance shall contain more than one subject, which shall be clearly expressed in its title. The enacting clause shall be, the city of Farrell hereby ordains. Any ordinance which repeals or amends an existing ordinance or part of the city code shall set out in full the ordinance sections and subsections to be repealed or amended, and shall indicate matter to be omitted by enclosing it in brackets or by strikeout type, or shall indicate the matter by underscoring it or by italics.
There's only one way to write an ordinance, right? I don't need to tell you how to do it.
Yeah, this.
That's crazy.
Okay, let's get rid of that.
Well, I think the beginning of it is,
Ordinance has a
Well, obvious the
definition,
procedure.
though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the beginning of this seems okay, you know, I'm gonna insert shall be, every proposed ordinance shall be introduced in writing and in the form required for final adoption. No ordinance shall contain more than one subject and shall be clearly expressed in its title. So
Why do you
just
need to
stop-
say
Just stop
that?
right there.
I don't know if you can say, plus, how do you define what one subject is?
Yeah, I'm okay with getting rid of all of it. I think ordinance has a general meaning in public government, and I'm sure Larry will keep.
Well, I think
the
this
balance
is,
of
this is the whole point that sets out that it has to be proposed, it has to be, you know, fully written out, so that you don't get some
Happens then.
haphazard.
Anybody on
Things
staff that
stated.
has an ordinance, it has to go through the solicitor before it can even go anywhere. That's how
But
it's set.
I think it comes, does that really have to be in
Yeah, something, that's how it is.
Charter.
the charter?
I think, you know, you could do that administrative code thing where the city adopts what they feel the form of an ordinance is.
So you know, right?
Right.
Okay.
I'd be okay with taking it out and then making certain it's in
I'm- If we're gonna take it out, I think we just need to be sure that we still have
Well, I think we need
the
to go
bare
through the
bones of the methodology.
And maybe we summarize all this into one paragraph, the
Yeah,
parts we think
yeah,
are
I
important,
think- Yeah, sure.
like B. Again, I think it's administrative code, in my opinion.
Yeah, again, I would also think that should be in the administrative code.
Would you read that, please?
Oh, boy. Procedure. An ordinance may be introduced by any member at any regular or special meeting of the council. Upon introduction of any ordinance, the city clerk shall distribute a copy to each council member and to the manager. Shall file a reasonable number of copies in the office of the city clerk and such other public places as the council may designate.
So we don't need that?
That's not it, no, there's more.
Well, that's the end of B.
Next,
Yeah,
ordinance
next
enactment.
page.
No, there's a lot more sections, but.
That's
I'm sorry.
502B.
No, I could get done.
But you really need that in there, I mean, that's pretty much what you would do, right?
That's like due process or
Yeah.
something. It's
Yeah.
like
I think it's an administrative code now.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's
I mean,
just the
there's-
point, is if it's not in there,
Well, is there generally,
Let's get it out unless Larry comes and says, hey, guess what, it's not in the
is there an
charter.
accepted understanding of what an ordinance is? A definition somewhere else other than this charter? Or do we need to specify?
I know legally what it
Yeah, no, that's what I'm asking. Is that,
is. They're the same in every municipality.
Does it need to be in the charter?
I don't think that language needs to be in the charter, other than maybe in writing.
When in doubt, throw it out.
so the word, when it's an ordinance, that doesn't necessarily mean it's in writing unless we
Well,
say
you
it's
would
in
think
there.
it would be.
In here it says that the solicitor prepares and revises ordinances. for
I've
the
never seen an
administrative code.
oral ordinance.
Is there,
So,
this whole section, is there something in Third State Code that
Yes,
lays this out in a similar fashion?
yes, the one subject per ordinance.
Okay, so that is legitimate as far as, if you strip it away, there's nothing else to give direction.
Right. Well, if you do that, if it's not somewhere else.
Okay, that's like, that's kind of happening.
But third class city code.
So
does
the way
say
this
so.
made it into these charters, because it is in the
Yes.
Third Class City Code, somebody felt it was important to retain some of that structure.
I think you're likely gonna find all of these in every charter.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think striking this, while I'm not gonna say every little thing has to be there, striking all of this stuff in general means that there's no ordinance anymore. It's all
Yeah.
basically resolution. We've now made it that this thing that we called an ordinance doesn't really matter anyway, because we just took away everything.
I could
in
work with
ordinance.
this if you want me to try to get
Yeah, that
whittle
might
this
be
down a little
Yeah,
bit.
I think we need the bare basics, but we
Okay, I
can't.
can do that.
Easton, or not Easton, but, yes, Easton,
Yeah,
sorry.
better.
Easton on page 8 and 9 did this all in ordinance in general, and they just did A, B, C, and D. A is form, B is procedure, C is effective date, and D is published. The It's not necessarily less text.
No, yeah.
Just longer
They
paragraphs.
kinda just did it,
But
like
the
little-
point is, but I think their layout is nicer. You know, instead of parsing all this out into a gazillion different sections, it's just, you know, form, procedure, date, publish.
And what was the part about the name of the bill, or the name of the ordinance, sorry? It has to be limited to one subject.
One
and then-
subject.
And then something about, there was something about the
The-
name of the ordinance.
The enacting clause.
And that's in East State. No ordinance shall contain more than one subject. I mean, I think that's pretty much good practice.
The enacting clause shall be, is what it says.
So you don't, and the reason for that is so that you don't bury some unrelated,
Yeah.
you know,
Like the
My concern is
House
it's
bill
roughly
stuff.
Exactly.
outlines what an ordinance is, but isn't overly burdensome.
Nobody.
yeah,
Well, I don't think you need the city of Farrell hereby ordains. You don't need
Right.
that. I don't think you need how you amend it by, you know, strike through or underline.
Yeah.
You either do it or you do it.
Right.
You know.
I vote to have Larry make his suggestions and we review those at the beginning of the next meeting.
I agree.
I would agree with that.
yeah. By the way, I wouldn't even disagree with you. I think you do need to have the strikeout and the underlined stuff, because if someone is, when you publish this and someone's reading, okay, what are they proposing to change to my law? It should be very clear what's being proposed to change.
Yeah, I'm fine with-
It's an easy thing to do. And that's exactly what you did when you gave us.
If
the
you feel the current,
I always do it that way.
Ordinances too.
So I think most people.
I think if you feel the current system works generally with a couple tweaks, that you write a,
See, that's not in
But
the
that
Fair
has,
Play
how it
City
has to
Code
go to the
about the
codification
brackets.
company. Yeah, it has to go to the codification that way so that they understand.
Yeah, our codification
We're
says
required
how
to do
we're
that.
going
We
to
have
do
to
it.
do
We
that.
just adopted a codification, and it specifically says, the city of Altoona hereby ordains.
Okay.
That's what we have to do with ordinances now.
Mhm.
And we have to do strike-throughs, but that's all,
So that they can
we have to
see
do that under our
how to
code,
amend it.
Yeah.
you know? But,
But I'm just, it doesn't seem to me it
It's
needs
a
to be in
house.
the charter. But
if there are a couple,
on that level of
if there are a couple bullet points that are required that
okay, let me.
keeps us
mess with
being in
this,
the wild, wild
and I'll
west.
show you what I did by strike-through. I'll show you what I did by strike-through.
Okay.
Gunsmoke.
You come out of a meeting and there's no departments and
Ten
there's
ordinances a year is
Yeah.
all.
no more city government after one meeting. They abolished it all.
All right, we're gonna ask for, yeah, I don't see this one.
We're going to finish that, and then there's, well, the next meeting is going to be,
So we canceled the next meeting, we're going to May.
we're going to May 6th, and we need to take care of general provisions, transition, and initiative and referendum, and finish this one up.
That'll be on the agenda, please, Linda.